think about it, but we are back behind the plate with Maren and Nate, and along with Maren, Angus Combs, the writer for Nebraska softball for the Nebraska page on SI.com. I'm Nate Rohr, the play-by-play voice of Nebraska softball. The Huskers open Big Ten play this weekend against Illinois. Here later in the show, we're going to chat with Sammy Netling, the BTN analyst for softball, also a former Northwestern catcher, and she can give us the global perspective on the Big Ten Conference and how the Huskers set up in the league and just kind of an overall picture of where things sit in the league. Since we last spoke to you, were we here before the last time we were here, I believe, was before the first home weekend. Does that sound right?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So it's been a little up and down for the Huskers. They go 0-4 in the Wichita State and Missouri weekend. They head down to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and go 3-1. Really could have gone 2-2. Nearly went 4-0. Lost a game to St. Francis in extra innings. They came back to beat St. Francis the day before. The Huskers come home. They lose their fifth straight at home to begin the 2024 season, 5-3 to Northern Colorado on Tuesday. And then Nebraska reels off 5 straight wins, the run rule win over Maine, and then 2 nail-biter wins over Northern Colorado and North Dakota, and then 2 run rule wins. So, Maren, we've had a couple weeks to sit here and try and figure out this Huskers softball team. What do you think? You have definitive answers after all that, I'm sure.
I think we're looking at what Nebraska is. They are a 500 ball club. And
inconsistent.
Very inconsistent. It is so hard to judge. It's hard to judge because they did escape playing Arkansas because of weather, right? I think that game could have told us a little bit more about that weekend. However, losing to St. Francis, yikes.
Yeah.
Big yikes. At least they got the run rule over Creighton.
Yes. And that maybe the most encouraging part about what we're looking at right now with Nebraska is the fact that the last 2 times that they took the field, the Saturday game against Creighton and then the Northern Colorado game on Sunday, especially that Creighton game, but to an extent the Northern game on Sunday as well, arguably 2 of their best performances of the season. I think the Creighton game was their most complete showing of this season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Creighton is not a terrible team either, but it's always nice to beat your rival.
Sure.
So I think the fact that they did win all 5 games at home is a positive as they move into playing against Omaha, who is technically the best team in the state right now.
Right. And the Mavs are coming off that weekend series sweep at Purdue, and Omaha has the great pitcher Cameron Meyer. Really, Sidney Neismer is pitching about as well.
Yes.
Maybe even a touch better than Meyer, which is a surprise. Neismer's been an okay second pitcher, but she has not been an ace throughout her career. And just by numbers, Neismer is as good, if not better, than Meyer, which is pretty impressive because I think Cameron Meyer could be slotted as maybe the best pitcher Omaha has had, certainly during their Division I era.
100%.
So it's another challenge for Nebraska. I want to go back, though. We were talking about the St. Francis loss and the Northern Colorado loss, and you tabbed it, yikes. And I want to dive into that a little bit more because, we are basically halfway through the softball season, give or take. Of course, we are seeing what's going on in basketball right now. And when resumes are looked at, when NCAA resumes are looked at, the parameters are a little different now that college basketball has the net rankings and softball still uses the RPI, but you still hear in college basketball about quad 4 losses. And in college softball, you could argue quad 4 is RPI 101 and lower. And Nebraska now has 2 losses to teams with RPIs in the hundreds. I mean, as we sit here today, Northern Colorado's RPI is 196. St. Francis's RPI is 123. Those are going to be 2 really big black marks on Nebraska's resume when we go to the selection committee in May and try and figure out where the Huskers are going and if the Huskers are going. And I think those losses are going to continue to hurt.
Yeah, and looking at RPI right now, Nebraska is sitting at 68 overall. That's a long way to go.
Yeah.
I honestly believe, when you look at Penn State, who's the highest in the Big Ten at 34.
Right.
Nebraska has got 5 teams between the two. Mm-hmm. So they've got to figure it out now in a hurry because the Big Ten conference schedule is not doing them any favors.
Yeah, that's kind of the worrisome part about this. 50 in RPI, you're in the conversation. You're probably on the wrong side of the bubble. You've got to be somewhere in the 40s to be thinking that you have a legitimate chance to go to regionals as an at-large. Of course, you can just answer the question and win the conference tournament, but only one team gets that automatic bid. But you're right, as you look at the rest of the conference, Penn State at 34, Northwestern at 39, Indiana at 43, Illinois at 51, Ohio State 52, Minnesota 57, Nebraska 68. So there's a long way to go for this team, and they need to be very good in the conference if they're going to play their way back up, because they're not going to get much of a boost in terms of playing tough opposition. They have to win a lot of games. And to that end, that means all phases have to be clicking. But I will say this, the one saving grace, but this can go both ways for you, is that the conference is not dominant, is not good. This is a down Big Ten conference from normal. Penn State has played a fairly weak schedule to get where they are in terms of record. Indiana is probably the best mixture of resume and results and just overall team, but they have some questions. Northwestern, I think, has done pretty solidly, but they have some ugly losses on their record. I'm surprised Illinois is as high as they are, because their season has been very up and down. They are 11-13 as we sit here today. They've not done much to impress in non-conference, and yet they're sitting there essentially 4th in the RPI among Big Ten teams. Nebraska has a chance to string some wins together, I think. And that's not to decry Illinois, Wisconsin next week. But at the same time, if Nebraska's going to play its way into an at-large bid, they're going to have to play pretty well. And they're going to have to put together a month and a half where they're pretty consistent. And you wonder if, especially on the pitching side, if they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's been the biggest question mark all year, and we talk about it all the time. With Kaylin Kenny becoming the ace, she really didn't look like an ace until maybe this last weekend.
Yeah.
But I don't think this pitching staff for Nebraska has a true ace. I think it is going to turn into more of a pitch by committee, because if Kenny isn't giving you the results that you need, who's the next woman up?
I would argue it's Caitlin Olensky, but that's a lot to put on a freshman.
Yeah.
But I will say Olensky has shown herself to be a very good high-level pitcher, especially as a freshman for Nebraska. Her last 5 games, an ERA of 2.19 over 22 and a third innings. Her start against Creighton was arguably the best start by a Husker pitcher this year. The curious case of Kaylin Kenny, I want to dive into that a little bit, because as we sit here today, Kenny has won 6 of her last 7 outings, all right? ERA of 3.50 over that run, which is not, if you have an ERA of 3.50, you're feeling pretty fortunate to win 6 out of 7. The other really baffling thing about her is that she has been a lot better coming out of the bullpen than she has been as a starter. And it's something I know the Husker coaching staff is examining. It's something they've had their eye on here the last couple of weeks because especially Kinney, but others on the staff, on this pitching staff too, have seemed to do better as relievers than starters. And that seems to be so far against what the norm is, because if you're coming in as a reliever, the game's already starting to go in the wrong direction. You're out of your routine. You don't know exactly when you're coming in. You don't know exactly what the situation's going to be when you come in. And yet Kinney has handled that better than starting. How do you figure that?
I think when I look at who is on this pitching staff, now I don't know Olinsky and Emerson Cope well, right? Haven't met them yet. Haven't had a chance to talk to them yet. But there's one person on this pitching staff who says, "Give me the ball," every single time, and she is not pitching this year.
Right.
Someone has to learn that mentality from her. I want the ball, give it to me, because Jordy's not there to do it.
Nope. No, she's not going to be able to pitch for you this year, but I think Kinney would be your most likely suspect, being a senior, being a captain, but it's something that's not been asked of her throughout her career. I mean, she came into this year and she had about a month where she was Nebraska's number 2 pitcher last year, but before the hand injury, and so she didn't really have the spotlight on her last year. And it felt like she was starting to figure out pitching at the collegiate level and starting to figure out how to bring her best self to the circle. That hand injury set her back. And then I also wonder how much of a mental burden it is for her to pitch as the ace, essentially. It felt like it was pretty tough thing for her to chew, and she had trouble with it.
Yeah, but at the same time, look at who is around her. Courtney Wallace is a grad assistant, right? Liv Farrell is on the coaching staff.
Yep.
Those are your last 2 aces of the staff.
Sure.
If you need advice, you have your predecessor right there.
Right. It's just tough to take advice and counsel and bring that into your mentality, because I think that's where it is the mental aspect of it and being able to bring your sharpest self to the game. And I know just from talking to the Husker coaching staff and the little I've talked with Kaylin Kinney, she's a hard worker. She's a good kid. I'm sure she feels this greater burden on herself, and it just feels like it's something that she has had difficulty reckoning with, and I don't know how you work through it. And I'll say this too. You think about the burden on this team. Nebraska started at home 0-5. And it surprises me a little bit, but at the same time kind of makes sense. Coming into the season, all these tickets got sold. All these fans are coming out to see Nebraska softball for the first time. And so you come home to Bowlin Stadium, and yeah, it's really nice to have 1,000+ fans there. They have 2,000 tickets sold, I think, for basically every home game. But it also comes with some pressure. It comes with those people expecting you to come out and win. And I think it took this team a couple of weeks to figure out how to internalize that, how to process that in their own minds, to use it as fuel instead of pressure, because it can be both.
Yeah. And I've always heard that saying, pressure is a privilege. And when you have a roster like this, the person who has, I think, the most pressure on her is Billie Andrews.
Oh, yes.
She has to produce offensively. She has to get it going every single game. She has to make plays in the field. And if she doesn't get it going, it affects the rest of the lineup.
Right.
So I think the offense is handling the pressure better than the pitching staff right now.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, you look at what the offense has been able to do the last week or so. So 5 games. That's after the first game against Northern Colorado. 5 games, they've scored 47 runs, hit 359 as a team. And I grant you, it's against Northern Colorado and North Dakota and Creighton. And those aren't great pitching staffs. But, look at what's happened in the Big Ten. You're not going to be facing much better either. And the offense, perhaps this week, and again, it is a hopeful sign that this homestand, or last week's homestand, if you will, ended with 2 really good showings, especially offensively. It feels like this offense has figured out how to do this thing, how to deal with being at home and working with the pressure and all of that. You brought up Billie Andrews, and this year has been a real treasure from her this year. She was named Big Ten Player of the Week for the second time this week, and an incredible showing the last couple of days again in that homestand. 2 hits against Creighton, 3 for 5, 4 RBI, school record tying 53rd career home run. And I know people are disappointed that Jordy Ball is out, as well they should be. She's an elite player. She's as good as it gets in the country. But I'll tell you something. One of the best players in college softball, one of the most complete, somebody who can do everything, is still on the field wearing a red jersey. Billie Andrews is about as good as it gets in college softball.
Yeah, 100%. I think I tweeted out maybe last week, I think her number should be retired immediately. I don't know what Coach Ravel's process is for retiring a number, but I don't think there will ever be another Billie Andrews. And the career that she's had at Nebraska, it won't be matched.
Yeah, it's been a terrific career, and you think about where it has come in the history of Nebraska softball. This program was at a low ebb when she came in as a freshman in 2021, and she had a good year as a freshman, and that team ended up 500 and put together a decent year. And then Billie was really the driving force behind the team that won the Big Ten tournament and got to a regional and got the Huskers back into postseason play. And then she was an All-American last year, and barring a total collapse, she's going to be an All-American this year. So you mentioned, you don't know what the process is to get somebody's jersey retired. Understand, Taylor Edwards' jersey is just now being retired. And I think that's more of an availability issue, to be honest, of getting them back, to come back to Nebraska, to be able to honor them properly. I don't know if they'll run into that sort of issue with Billie Andrews. So if it doesn't happen like right after the season, don't be worried is what I'm saying. Because I think Billie's career will get in that neighborhood where it should be honored with a retired jersey. I mean, like I said, barring a complete collapse, she's an All-American.
Yeah.
She'll end up as an All-American for a second time in her career. She'll end up as your career home run record holder. Again, barring something horrible. It's interesting. So she's in a neighborhood right now with Taylor Edwards, Allie Viola, and then her. And I asked Coach Ravel before one of the games, okay, compare and contrast these guys. And, it's interesting. She said they all three wanted the bat in their hand when the game mattered, which of course makes sense. All three of them were very good complete hitters for average, hitters for power. The difference that Billie has compared to the other two is her athleticism, her ability to steal bases, the ground she covers defensively. I mean, she is on the short list of best 5-tool players in school history. There might have been players who were able to do more. Taylor Edwards might be a little better hitter. Ali Viola might have been a little better hitter. But in terms of being able to hit for power, run, catch, throw, do all five things and do them well, I don't know that this program's had better than Billy Andrews.
No, and when you look at where her career ranks in the program, okay, yeah, she's tied for first in home runs.
Mm-hmm.
She's second in slugging. She's fifth in extra base hits, fifth in total bases, sixth in batting average, and eighth in runs scored.
Yeah. With plenty of time, with half a season to add numbers. And I think there's good reason to believe that she has a great second half ahead of her. And you know, you think about Billy's candidacy. One thing that will help her is the fact that she was an All-American last year, and we know this. You know, whether it's preseason polls, how they pick conferences, whatever, they start with what you did last year. Well, Billy had a great year last year. She's doing better this year, and again with the conference she's going to face, I think she's going to have more than enough opportunities to build on those numbers, to put up big numbers, and really make a strong final statement about who she is and where she ranks in the country and where she ranks in the Big Ten. I mean, are we talking about the Big Ten Player of the Year right now?
At this rate, I think so.
Yeah.
I don't see another player out there who is matching her.
Right.
And against the competition that she's played against.
Because Nebraska has played one of the tougher schedules in all of college softball. And that is one rubric that we need to examine where Nebraska is through, is the idea that, you know, the Huskers have played a really tough schedule. And so the record's 16-12. It doesn't look as dominant as you would hope. But at the same time, they've challenged themselves in a pretty extreme way. And the thing is that you go from those challenges that feel a little out of reach, you know, the UCLA game, the Duke game, Mizzou, what have you. They have some chances against, I'll say, like competition. And to my surprise, Illinois fits into that category. Their RPI number 51 coming into this weekend. They've got 3 against Northwestern. Their RPI 39. Penn State, as we said, is RPI 34. And then Kansas is putting together a terrific year. So there are chances for this team against teams that are kind of in their weight class. And that might be one of the saving graces of this team this year.
Yeah, it might, and it very well might be, like you said. I think they've really got to circle that Kansas game as of right now.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, Kansas is kind of a game that you look at and like, oh, that's a W.
Right.
Kansas is ranked right now, people.
Yeah, they just swept Baylor this past weekend, so that'll be a big time midweek game at Bowlin Stadium here in a couple of weeks. Here I have my scorebook. We're showing it on the video. I'm holding it up on the video. My scorebook last year got soaked at Northwestern because it was raining the entire weekend.
That's right.
And they didn't have room in the press box for visiting radio. They hardly have room in that press box for PA, for the SID, and for the video crew, whether it's BTN, whether it's BTN plus, whatever. So I was stuck outside. My scorebook got soaked, and it looks like a modern art masterpiece. And I wasn't very happy about it because I love my scorebooks. They're historical records. So, and here's the other part for me with Northwestern and their stadium. So the football program is getting a new stadium right now, whole new stadium. And they've already gotten a practice facility, workout facility, locker room, all that. Men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball got a heavily renovated Welsh Ryan Arena. Baseball has a glittering new stadium. It's not very big, but it's brand new, and what's there is really nice. Yet the most successful program on the Northwestern campus has been softball, and they had not gotten a new facility until this week. It's about damn time.
Yeah. It is. It really is. And it goes to say, we've talked about it before on this podcast, and I think we'll continue talking about it. But as long as the sport wants the visibility, they have to have the facilities that allow it.
Right.
An ESPN is not going to come in and have you on a nationally televised game if you don't have the accommodations for them. And I mean, look at the Pac-12. Look at what's happening. Sometimes they only have one camera behind home plate. If it goes down the left field line or the right field line, you can't see anything.
Right.
But I talked to a coworker. It's going to cost $30 million to renovate Easton Stadium at UCLA.
Yeah. But it needs to be done.
It needs to be done, but the Pac-12 doesn't have the money.
Right.
Therefore, maybe they'll get it with the Big Ten.
Well, you certainly hope so. And I'm sure, the one thing UCLA has going for it in terms of that is that softball is a much bigger priority for that athletic department and on that campus than it is on most of the Big Ten campuses. That's sad for the schools that are in the Big Ten right now, but it does bode well for UCLA. All right, let's turn our attention to the Big Ten schedule for this week, the first week of conference play. And we start with a really good series out in Happy Valley, Indiana and Penn State.
Ooh.
And that, to me, that's kind of a prove-it series, right? Because, just on paper, I think Indiana is the best team in this conference based on what they've done, based on who they have coming back. They lost Taryn Kern. They brought back basically everything else from last year's team. Penn State had severe losses to their pitching staff. They appear to have developed a couple new, really good pitchers, but they also played a fairly easy schedule. I want to see where Penn State is. Right now, I feel like if I'm looking at it, Penn State has to prove something to me if they're going to stay in the mix for an at-large bid.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at the rankings right now, the standings right now, they're 1 and 2. So I think this is a really big series for the conference in general, and I really want to see what Penn State is made of.
Sure.
I know they have good pitching, but how good is it against the conference?
Yeah, and especially against that Indiana lineup. Northwestern, we mentioned they're getting a new ballpark. It's not going to be popping up in the next week. So they are still going to be at Sharon J. Drysdale Field to host Michigan State. The Spartans been okay through non-conference play, but nothing out of the ordinary for them. I think this is a weekend where Northwestern can build some equity and start pursuing a third straight Big Ten regular season title. I think they're well set up for that. Minnesota at Maryland, I think that would be a series where Minnesota is pretty clear favorite.
I say that, but yeah, I would say that too. But Courtney White. Yep. I think we got corrected on that last year too.
We'll see.
Courtney White, great pitcher at Maryland. And I think she might give them a little bit of trouble.
Okay. I think Maryland can get a game, and that series is at home. I'm interested to see where Minnesota stacks up too, because I would have put them in that upper echelon until the last week or so. Michigan hosting Purdue. Purdue just got swept by Omaha. Michigan, can they hit? Like they have had the weakest lineup in the Big Ten, and especially with the talent they usually have, that's a real shock. I would give Michigan a pretty clear edge in this series, but I mean, at the same point, you can't win 0 to -1.
No. I wouldn't be surprised if we see low-scoring games. If you pay attention to this series and you see Michigan win 1-0, 2-0, don't think that that's because Purdue is a great team.
Right.
Michigan is down.
The offense is a mess. It wasn't very good last year, and they lost most of the material from last year.
Right.
So that series out in Ann Arbor, you have Iowa hosting Wisconsin. I mean, this is a lower half series in the Big Ten. Pretty even series, should be pretty hotly contested, but I don't know that either of these teams will be factors in the Big Ten race. And then the last one, kind of an interesting one, Ohio State at Rutgers. Ohio State has been kind of who they've been. Top half of the Big Ten, but not a slam dunk regional team, not a team that you're sitting there going, oh, they're going to win the conference title. And Rutgers has won more than they've lost and put together a decent non-conference. But again, their schedule's been kind of weak. So I don't know what to make of Rutgers, and I don't know how big a challenge they'll give Ohio State. I feel like this is a series Ohio State wins on the road.
I do too. I actually watched some of Ohio State's games against Kentucky over the weekend, and they split in Lexington. So I think that Ohio State is probably a little bit better than we think, because Kentucky is a tournament team, and just because they're in the SEC, but they're a good team,
right?
And Rutgers. We were hot on Rutgers last year, but then when they lose Vickers to Kentucky, I think that drops them back down into that lower half.
Yeah, and Rutgers has been at that level these last couple of years where they play a pretty easy non-con. They win at a pretty good clip in non-conference, but they end up middle of the pack-ish toward the bottom in the Big Ten. This Ohio State series, I think, is an opportunity for them to state where they are. Yeah. Who are you? And then finally, Nebraska, Illinois. And again, if Nebraska is going to be an at-large team, this is a series they win and maybe sweep.
I think they have to.
Have to? I don't know that I would go that far, but I think they have to. Sweeps have to come somewhere,
right?
And this might be one of their better chances, especially with it being a home series. You look at the home series that they have. They have Penn State, and we've talked about them, and then Northwestern, and they're only the two-time defending conference champs, and look like they'll be right in the thick of it again this year. So, I mean, I don't know that I would go that far, but I can't put together a good argument that says you're wrong either.
Yeah.
And especially with this team's inconsistencies, you've got to win every game you can. So I think it's an important series if Nebraska is going to get that momentum going to where they're going to be in the thick of the Big Ten race and competitive for an at-large bid. You might be right. They might need to sweep this one.
This is a series, I think, by looking at the RPI, it would be more of a steal of a series, right, to be Illinois. Because for Nebraska to be the at-large bid, they have to win the games against all the teams that are ranked below them.
Right.
And then they have to steal wins from the teams above them.
Yep.
The more you steal, the more likelihood
you'll
go up. And so if they want to go up, they've got to win the series.
Yeah, they absolutely have to win the series. Maybe they have to sweep it. So, going to be an interesting weekend. Our first look at Big Ten Conference play, and we'll wrap it up all for you next week here on Behind the Plate.